Hi, this is Rob Pierce with worshipbasics.com, and today I would like to talk with you about financing. How do you finance a startup contemporary worship service? There's no doubt about it, contemporary services are more expensive than traditional services are. There's a very good chance that you're going to have to buy some new equipment. Many traditional services just don't have the right sort of equipment to take care of contemporary service needs. You're also going to have to buy a CCLI license. This is the license that gives you permission to either project or copy lyrics for people in your congregation to use during contemporary services. And you may also need to hire someone. There's a possibility that you don't have anyone in your fellowship who is able to lead a contemporary worship service, so it might be necessary for you to go out of the body to hire someone to be the worship leader. In many cases, people who are members of traditional churches are fine with starting a contemporary service until you start to talk about how much it's going to cost, and then they get pretty nervous about it. But it is a matter of priorities. For instance, those same people, if the pipe organ broke down, they wouldn't have any problem coming up with the money to repair that. Or if there was a major problem with facilities, they certainly wouldn't balk at spending the money to take care of that. But please remember, the church is a lot more than just a facility. Programs are also every bit as important, if not more important, than the facility of the church itself. Your church may have managed a renovation recently. Many churches will do capital campaigns to raise money for a major renovation, and if you have gone through one of those, you could consider starting a new service, sort of a renovation when it comes to programs, not just the building. It took faith and funding to establish your church, but your founders did it. The people who started your church had to be faithful in their giving and faithful in their discipline, and thank goodness they were, or you wouldn't be where you are now. There's no reason why you can't do it for future generations. Here's some advice whenever you're starting a contemporary service and looking for funding. First of all, of course, you have to pray. Hopefully you've already done praying. That helps you to understand that God has led you to start this service. If he has, then prayer will be necessary to get the funding there. He will provide, but you have to ask him. I should also mention that money follows ministry, that if you start a contemporary service and it does well, then hopefully more people will be joining the church and they'll be supporting it with their giving. So hopefully you'll be able to see a rise in giving that will help offset the costs of starting this service. God delights in giving impossible tasks to his people. If you read the Old Testament, it's full of story after story of people who God has asked to do things that just wasn't humanly possible for them. And he does this a lot of times, I think, to help us learn to live by faith. But you should also balance faith with stewardship. Most congregations sort of have two groups of people. There are the bean counters who insist that all the financing be in place down to the penny before anything is done. And then you have a group of total faith people who say, oh, it doesn't matter, we can take out loans for millions because God will provide for us. I think it's probably wisest to live somewhere in between those two extremes. You can also do many things with what you already have, and pray that God will provide for your needs for future expansions. A little bit more advice. In some cases, needs that you have for the contemporary service would be met if you just brought them to the attention of the congregation. We have not because we ask not. If there's a need that you have for starting this service, make sure the congregation knows. There may be people who are very interested in supportive of what you're doing who are just waiting to know that there is a need. So let them know and they may be perfectly willing to help you out. You should also make sure that the new service is framed as a mission to the local community. Many churches are perfectly willing to give to missions, but they often think of them as things that happen overseas. Starting a contemporary service is like a missionary outreach in your own community. And if you are convinced that it is God's will for you to start a service, a contemporary service in your church, in all honesty, how can you possibly fail? God always provides for the things that he is asking you to do. When God closes a door, what do I mean by this? You may have heard the expression, well, if God has closed that door, he may open a window somewhere else. sometimes that saying bothers me a little bit because many people have often used that as an excuse. If the slightest little roadblock comes up in the way, they may say, well, God is just closing that door. Well, or maybe it's just he wants you to work harder to make sure things get taken care of. So just because things get a little bit difficult doesn't necessarily mean you should just go and give up. Maybe God just wants you to work hard. Sometimes when a door closes, you need to just kick it open. Now, here are some specific funding suggestions that have worked for my church and others that I've heard of. I hope some of these will work for you. You could try a capital campaign. Often this is done for building funds, but it can be also quite successful for programs like starting a new contemporary service too. You can't go to the well too often, but it's a great place to start if you haven't done one for a while. Show and tell. Show and tell is, just to give you an example, in our church we wanted to buy a projector so that we could project lyrics of songs and we could project PowerPoints and films, things like that. One of the things that we did is we borrowed one, and during graduation we showed pictures of graduating seniors along with text saying what their accomplishments had been in school and what their plans for the future were. A lot of parents just thought this was the greatest idea ever, and it was a pretty easy sell to buy a projector after we did that. Can you hear me now? If you have a sound system that is not very good, if it's just on its last legs or it's old, a lot of times the poor quality of your sound system can be used as a strong selling point to buy a new one. Now, I'm not suggesting you intentionally make it sound bad, but in many cases, the best selling point for a new sound system is how bad the old sound system sounds. Dinners and bake sales. These are often used for missionary outreaches, but there's no reason you can't use it for the missionary outreach of your new contemporary service too. Special offerings. Many churches hold these once a month or once a quarter. If you have a special offering, there's no reason why you couldn't hold one for the new contemporary service too. Some other ideas. You could mind your budget. Go to your church financial secretary. Many churches just have these incredible large budgets, and unless you're really familiar with it, you really don't know what money's available where for what. In many cases, there is already money set aside that might be perfectly accessible for something that you want to buy to support the contemporary service. So talk with your church financial secretary and have her see what she can find in your budget to help out. You can also accept electronic payments. Many churches have websites now. If you don't, you really should consider getting one. Accepting electronic payments is a great way to help finance a contemporary service or other ministries in the church. A Buy a Brick campaign. This is a thing that's become popular over the last few years. You just allow people, members in your congregation, to buy a brick in their own name or their families, or maybe to honor a loved one who's passed away, and they make a sidewalk or build a wall out of them. And it's a great way for them to support the church, and they get to see their name sort of put in the church in a permanent way. It's a great program. An auction. Many members of your church, especially elder members, aren't really interested in doing garage sales, but they have all sorts of things they don't really have a use for anymore. Why not have them donate them to the church, and you can have a Chinese auction or a real auction in the church basement sometime, or maybe even a member might be willing to put them up for sale on eBay, and that can really bring in a lot of money over time. And one of my favorites, a lot of times this is done with youth groups. They like to use this one, but it could work for this too. It's fun. Jail the pastor. People either make donations to put him in jail or they make donations to bail him out. And if you have cooperative local policemen, they can really help play this up, and it can be a lot of fun. Well, these are just some specific suggestions. I hope some of them help for you. If not, remember, just do what you can with what you have and pray that God will provide for your needs. And if this service really is truly God's will, as we hope it is, then He will provide for you. Good luck and God bless.